Good day, everyone. We're just gonna give a couple minutes for people to sort of filter in, just because most people will probably want to grab something to eat or drink. And then we'll get started. I'll do a brief introduction of Scott, and then we'll hand it over to him to give the talk. Okay, it's 11:02, and I think we'll just get started at this point. So again, I will give a brief introduction of Scott, and then I will hand the torch over to him. So Scott is a director of machine learning and AI at Improving. He comes from a full stack development background, but enjoys infrastructure and backend development as well. He has a wide range of industry experience from transportation, finance, nonprofit, and healthcare sectors. His passions lie in machine learning and AI, with broader interests spanning from data engineering, data analytics, and quantum computing. And in his free time, Scott has several hobbies, including yoga, golf, and snowboarding. So Scott will be talking about how we can maximize value in FinOps and productizing AI today. So without further ado, go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Himika, for that amazing intro. Appreciate it. So I'm Scott Poulin. I'm going to talk to you today about exploring financial operations, FinOps, and how to productionize artificial intelligence or machine learning projects, and how those two kind of coincide together, and kind of going along and maximizing your value with the combination of those two practices together. So jumping into it, quick overview, kind of what we're going to look at today. So we're going to kind of go through an introduction of FinOps. What is that? What are the components of it? Kind of a easy way to remember kind of key components when it comes to FinOps and AI and how those kind of correlate, and the benefits that you really get from integrating Fin operations into your overall AI production, productizing AI and that life cycle, integrating FinOps into that aspect to it. Then we'll kind of start to talk about productizing AI and the different challenges that exist there, and then the steps in which how you kind of go about taking your product that you have, or the project that you have as a company, and then turn it into a product to either sell or utilize at a larger scale. And then we'll talk about some different types of case studies. A really good scenario of where a solution was essentially productized, utilizing different types of principles of FinOps and the productionalizing or productizing frameworks, and how to go about down that route. And then talk about an opportunistic scenario where it had some different opportunities that it could have worked on, but is honestly a scenario that helped build out a lot of these frameworks that exist today to allow for better products as they are released into the wild. And then we'll have some time for questions as well, but feel free to drop some questions inside the webinar chat, and I'll try to get to them as I see them, and then we'll kind of go along that way. So continuing on here. So understanding what is FinOps, essentially it's just your goal to utilize your company's money to bring both innovation, efficiency, at a cost-effective aspect in your cloud operations, ensuring that cloud resources are optimally used while meeting all of your business requirements for either the project itself or for a product that you're trying to release to the public or to your customer base. So here's just a collection of different components within inside of FinOps. We aren't going to go too deep into the aspects of FinOps because that honestly could be its own presentation or honestly a whole course in general, to be honest. There's just a number of different key aspects when it comes to FinOps and AI, and we'll kind of get into that in the next slide here. But these are just kind of the big ones kind of to point out when it comes to FinOps itself. Cloud cost management has to do a lot with the aspect of tracking, monitoring, and analyzing costs associated with cloud services and resources. Typically, organizations utilize a lot of different tools when it comes to this, that come with cloud platforms that exist out there today. So there's AWS, Azure, and GCP all have really great tools to help you manage this and monitor it and go forward with that. Cost allocation attribution. This mostly has to do a lot with the distributed costs that occur with cloud and how do you monitor that and handle that and effectively identify who's creating what costs with inside of your organization. Because once you come to a cloud provider as a large organization, typically they have multiple different sections of the actual cloud that individuals or departments are using. And so having a good understanding on how to break that up and analyze the cost and where it's coming from is kind of where this kind of comes into play. And then that falls into budgeting and forecasting, how to understand who's going to cost more compute or storage or just total cost of cloud resources that exist out there. So this is another one of those key components to really understand as an organization, go to and be able to utilize the cloud optimally. And then resource optimization is kind of falling into that aspect of getting rid of stuff that you don't need, keeping stuff you do, and then making sure the compute or storage is optimized for your specific solution and going down that route and making sure that it's the most cost effective. There's a lot of tooling that actually exist on some of the cloud platforms to help you do this. And so it's kind of good to take advantage of those to make sure that you are optimizing your solution for the cloud properly with a cost aspect or a cost mindset. And then governance compliance, this kind of comes into play with understanding around your data and different types of aspects of access when it comes to APIs and how that accesses certain aspects of data as well. So another big key component to understand and really take in consideration when you're starting to look at not only just AI projects, but overall projects that are on the cloud. And then collaboration and communication, how does that work between your IT, finance, and business teams, and how to ensure that properly goes effectively across, and then that there's proper collaboration. This is kind of one of the big pitfalls that occur within larger organizations that are newly adopting cloud. This is kind of one of those big conflicts that can arise. And so having this put in place and set in stone with your organization kind of alleviates a lot of headaches that can occur when adopting a cloud service, especially when it comes to AI aspects. Cloud service management, this is kind of just selecting different types of cloud services or vendors that you're using and integrating into your cloud. There's a lot of different marketplaces that exist out inside of the different cloud platforms that provide different types of tool sets that you can integrate into your overall cloud platform that help you do all various different aspects of your business. And so just having this aspect of it helps you understand which ones are most effective and what are going to be cost effective as well. So just something to kind of keep in consideration. Performance monitoring, this is kind of just going to the aspects of evaluating the costs of your actual resources that are deployed. So if you think about it from a compute standpoint, how much compute is being scaled up and being processed, is it the right way of being scaled up? Is there a different architecture that should be considered when handling different types of serving up content? So just that aspect of understanding performance monitoring of your actual compute or your different resources that you're using and making sure that they're effectively going across and providing the best customer experience when your customer base comes to interact with whatever you're hosting on the cloud platforms. Then automation DevOps, this is just an MLOps when it comes to AI, is just kind of how deployment and handling of different types of infrastructure and code and all that gets handled and puts in place. Having a lot of this initially put in place just handles or alleviates a lot of headaches downstream when it comes to modernizing and adding more content or adding more solutions, adding more products. This having this kind of set in stone just allows for better management overall, and then just allows for more cost-effective aspects of your individuals who are going through and actually helping setting this up inside your cloud. And then training and education is always a big thing, just trying to make sure that individuals who are setting this stuff up, people who are planning a lot of this, making sure that they have this aspect of FinOps in their mind to correlate and go back and make sure that they're doing their best to optimize and maximize cost when it comes to a business aspect. Then continuous improvement, this is just aspects of utilizing all these different practices to establish different types of performance metrics and cost saving initiatives to kind of help make sure that when the business changes, when the business needs change, you can easily be flexible and modify your strategy when it comes to your cloud situation and be most cost effective. So that's just a kind of brief overview of all those different types of large aspects of financial ops, components. So just things to kind of keep in mind and consider. There's probably a couple other ones that I would touch on, but these were the big ones that really stood out to me that I wanted to mention. That being said, how does that correlate back to AI? So one of the big things that I always like to introduce to folks when they're trying to think about introducing artificial intelligence or machine learning projects into their organizations is kind of use this acronym, or just a way to remember it, as AEIOU. So if you're an English speaker, these are all the major vowels that exist within inside the English language. I know there's this sometimes why, but I didn't include that because there was no real good way to have that in there. But these are the major vowels that exist in the English language. So accountability, efficiency, inspection, and optimization and utilization. So these are the kind of big things to kind of consider when it comes to artificial intelligence projects, and you're integrating them into a cloud performance aspect and keeping financial operations in consideration. So accountability, it's understanding, assigning responsibility for your cost optimization. And that kind of goes with that cost allocation, attribution, and cost management aspects. Efficiency, this kind of goes along with enabling automation and creating new aspects faster or new projects faster, utilizing resources in a standardized fashion, having governance and all that stuff with your organization when it comes to your cloud. Comes down to resource, your governance compliance, your cloud service management aspects, automation and DevOps integration. So just different aspects into those pieces there that kind of fall back into there. Inspection, this just comes into the aspects of monitoring and tracking your AI related expenses, which just kind of goes with both the governance aspects and the performance monitoring to understand how those things kind of correlate and come back together. And then which essentially feeds into resource optimization and the optimization aspect, and just making sure you're finding your resources and minimizing costs where you can, and that way you don't utilize resources that you don't need. Otherwise, you're spending money of the company that actually doesn't need to be spent. And just from the aspect of reducing any sort of issues when it comes to overspending and stuff. And then utilization, identification of proper tooling and resources. This kind of just comes back to that cloud cost management, cloud service management as well. Just identifying and making sure that you're choosing the right resources for the right project and right situation. So out of all of those, I want to kind of point out 5 different major ones that come into play for AI. I know I mentioned a bunch of them, but these are, I'd say, the big ones that come into play. So cloud cost management, resource optimization, cloud service management, and performance monitoring, automation, DevOps, integration. So with all of these, for example, cloud cost management, one of the big things here is just critical to understand the different aspects of where engineers can essentially spend countless dollars. And a lot of that comes into play when you think about MLOps and machine learning and data science is, for example, one of the big ones that I commonly see is that individuals or industries or companies, will set up Databricks clusters and don't really have the necessary governance and proper controls around the cluster itself and the Databricks environment, and they'll let data scientists kind of run loose, and then they'll rack up a huge bill just due to the amount of compute and analysis that's being done on-site of the Databricks cluster, and costing the company lots of money and making them shy away from such a necessary product. So making sure a lot of that aspects are in there, and providing those holistic aspects of, when it comes to the platform, put the necessary controls to prevent any issues like that. So it comes into that cost management aspects and the governance and all that. So it all kind of rolls back together. Resource optimization. This is one of the big things for AI, because one of the commonality aspects, especially when you're starting to look into what's pretty common and what's it called, very popular in the world of AI right now, is large language models. Fine tuning and creating and training a brand new large language model are intensely expensive. You're talking about $2,000 to $15,000 up to $30,000 just to train a single model. And then fine tuning is a fraction of the cost, but is still just as expensive when it comes to handling all of that stuff. So just kind of keeping that in mind, optimizing your compute properly. That way you're not spinning up the largest clusters and the biggest GPUs and all that stuff that you don't maybe not necessarily need. It's kind of going through and understanding, what do I need on my project to actually implement this aspect? And we'll kind of get into a lot of this when we start talking about the productizing of AI's solutions, and how that kind of comes into play, because that's one of the big key aspects that comes into there. And so that's where that intermingling of FinOps and productizing AI comes into play. But we'll get to that here in a soon. But for cloud service management, it just kind of goes back to deciding what tooling you're supposed to be using. If you're going to use like the cloud APIs that cloud ML and AI APIs that exist out there, or if you're using a vendor product that exists and they have a way to deploy it to specific clouds, just really understanding that aspect as when you should use something that's out of the box or off the shelf, or when you should build something totally custom. So that's another big proponent when it comes to financial operations and AI. Understanding that balance of what's going to be more cost effective, what makes sense for our organization, where does the IP fall. So that's one of the big considerations when it comes to financial operations as well. And then performance monitoring, this one's kind of straightforward, understanding what compute from an inference or from a training level is out there. And understanding like also storage capability. Can we refine our storage capabilities and reduce our costs there too? So having all those different pieces in place helps with a lot of the principles of financial operations, making sure that those solutions are more cost effective and you see a better ROI from a project basis. And then also when it comes to productizing your data, your solution, your AI solution, does it return a larger have a larger return on investment? And then automation and DevOps, this one's just kind of straightforward, especially when you're coming into a platform, making sure that you have standardized processes in place that allow you to deploy new solutions and effectively deploy them, how to scale them and all that. Making sure this is like probably one of the largest components when it comes to financial operations and AI. I'd say this is probably a very important aspect. And that may be because I'm a little biased because I come from a solutioning software engineering space, and having necessary toolings out in there that allow for easy deployment and handling of different solutions is probably one of my big cost savers, because it's cost saving not only from a principle of compute standpoints and different pieces that you integrate in and how to deploy things faster, but it's also from a cost savings of your engineers' time. So you spend less time for engineers to go out and do manual things, and they're actually doing things from a automated standpoint. So that being said, we're going to jump into kind of the benefits of financial operations, right? The big things here are cost savings, and that one's kind of evident, and that's what we really want. Predictable budgeting, understanding where if we have a predictable budget, we can understand as to how much money we'll have allocated towards a certain projects or collection of projects, allow us to understand how much money do we have left over for new projects or new aspects that we want to have brought. And then resource optimization, just allowing to understand different aspects of innovation, driving innovation rather than having to come back and refine different pieces of your actual infrastructure or your applications to reduce cost and all that. So it just doing it ahead of time pays dividends down the line for innovation and aspects of bringing new products into the world. So that's financial operations, but how does that integrate with AI and productizing AI and doing all that? Well, first we have to understand the different aspects of steps of productizing AI. So we'll jump into that. So here is kind of just talking about this and why it's kind of important of productizing AI. As everyone probably knows today, and we've seen in the news, AI solutions are just growing exponentially, and finding new companies out there that are constantly growing and bringing new pieces into solutions into play is just kind of incredible, the number of companies that exist out there. But that doesn't mean that they didn't face a number of different challenges that exist out there today. So here's just honestly a huge list of different challenges that can come into play: scalability, data quality, user experience, all that stuff. So there's a collection of ones that I think are probably the most important when it comes to productizing AI that you need to take into consideration. So scalability, this simply has to do with the fact of understanding the traffic that's coming through your system and how that kind of comes into play with your overall solutioning of what you've built out. And so kind of the FinOps aspects of that comes back to like optimizing your compute and putting different pieces in place to handle larger user traffic. So there's different solutions where you can put governance or essentially limiters that allow individuals to access your APIs only a certain amount of time, or make a number of certain amount of requests. And so these are different aspects that you have to kind of consider, especially when it comes to scalability itself. Another huge thing that's coming out, and I'm sure everybody's seen in the news, is data privacy and security. This is huge to really understand. And if you don't really take these in consideration, along with regulatory aspects and ethical considerations, you're going to get burned in the media, and you'll lose trust inside of your product itself. And then you have developed a product that nobody wants to utilize simply because they don't trust it. And trust is huge inside of every organization when they release a new product. And we'll kind of talk about that in one of the case studies as well. And so that being said, model robustness and reliability, that kind of falls into there as well. So if your model itself, it doesn't have the ability to predict what users want or provide the reliability they need, or just comes off with off-the-wall answers that they don't like or don't appreciate, you'll lose customer base and they won't like the product, and you'll lose trust in them, and you'll lose their trust and be able to go forward with them as a client. So just things that kind of different considerations to be brought into play when you start to work through the productizing AI frameworks. And then continuous learning and improvement. How do you make that model better as you grow? As we've seen that from like ChatGPT and Bard and all these other tools, Llama, they're constantly growing and trying to get better and better and better. There's different cases and there's arguments to be made that like ChatGPT 3.5 to ChatGPT 4, there's some degradation with different aspects, but there's also growth and enhancement in others. So it's just kind of understanding market research and understanding where your customer base is using your product and where to enhance it and where to kind of take the hit of where it's not going to perform. And then cost management. This is huge, obviously, and it kind of falls back into that FinOps aspects and understanding the balance of how much compute are we throwing at this? How much time and resources are we throwing at retraining and making our solution better and growing, and then compared to the revenue that we're driving in? And so just a number of different aspects when it comes to productizing your AI solution. That being said, here are kind of from a new framework that we're coming up with is a Productizing AI Framework. It's our improving one, stemmed from different aspects from Facebook, Google, and AWS and Azure, different tools that are like hardships that they've gone through kind of, and then also documentation that they've provided. We've combined all of this together to kind of form our own framework and what we see as most important based off our client interactions with when it comes to AI production and AI creation. And so this is just the series of 16 steps. We probably won't walk through them, but I'll definitely give you the highlights of the ones that I feel that are most critical. So first and foremost is defining that clear objectives and value proposition. If this is not done properly, you will fail from the start. Having good metrics and understanding what your AI and machine learning projects and product is supposed to be doing and what it's supposed to give back is key. If you're just building a solution to build a solution and you try to productize it, it's going to fail from the start. Whether that be you don't get enough traffic utilizing your product, or you get the traffic that uses the product and then they hate it and you lose their trust and you aren't able to come back from that. So just a number of different things come into this aspect of defining clear objectives and value proposition. So making sure that you put that in place. We have a different series of workshops that kind of help our clientele to build this type of situation out and how to effectively go through this process. After that, data collection and preparation, this is huge. This is when it comes to any sort of ML and AI project, this is pretty much, I would say, 70% of the work. Because if you don't have the data already, you have to collect it and figure out how you're going to continually get that data and how is it going to affect downstream aspects of your overall solution. And so if you already have the data and you have a way of collecting it and preparing it and providing it for downstream solutions, then that's great. You've already solved majority of your problem. After that, I would definitely recommend doing a POC construction. Otherwise, if you don't really know what you're going to get yourself into and understand whether or not the problem that you're trying to solve or the solution you're trying to create is actually viable. And if you can't show that it's actually viable, it's almost not worth it to continue forward. There's ways to where you can start small and kind of show a subsample of an entire POC and construct it out as time goes on. So it's better to break your problem up into smaller pieces and reframe your problem in different aspects. So if you, for example, you have a larger project and you can't solve it with any sort of model or situation because of a lack of data or some situation. Well, if there's a small subsample aspect of that you can actually predict, build that first. And then as time goes on, you'll build other pieces that kind of come together that build that final story. And then you build an overall system that works together to provide you that beginning aspect that you're trying to solve. And so that 1, 2, and 3 is kind of a cyclical aspect until you've defined and built out a POC that solves your clear objectives and value proposition. And so once that's kind of completed, you can kind of go forward with your model requirements, scalable infrastructure deployment, find out the market research and validation. Does the market actually need the solution that you're building? You may have built out a project that works for your internal company, and that's great. But do the market research to understand, is this what other companies need? Is this what my clientele needs? Is this what my current customer base needs? Is there a customer segment that I'm not actually accessing that actually needs this? And then I'll grow my business that way. So understanding that market research and validating whether or not that's actually true is kind of key. There's a couple of different aspects that you can go into when it comes to this market research that really helps you understand to go down that process. Once you've gotten that validation, start looking at user experience. I can't stress this enough because user experience is key, because if you just have horrible user experience, people will not use your product. There's time and time again, there's a number of different examples we're showing that user experience is essentially key for this, for most products to even be successful. I mean, my favorite story is Robinhood. They built out an amazing platform for you to go in and do buying and selling of stocks and such, and do it in a really easy way to understand it and do it effectively. And then on top of that, a bunch of other things that they introduced. So I know for a fact that Robinhood was when they first came out, were even given awards due to the aspect of the user experience. So kind of keeping that in mind and making sure you put that into play before actually going out and releasing it out to the wild, making sure proper user experience is implemented. That being said, testing and quality assurance are probably right behind that. Making sure that you have all your bases covered when it comes to privacy and compliance, governance, all that stuff, safeties and guardrails and such, to make sure that your AI solution isn't going to go off the wall and just do something that you don't expect it to, and provide unnecessary outputs that may be offensive or anything like that. So making sure testing and quality assurance are key, because there are a number of different solutions that have been recently released that have not done this, and they just kind of go from the get-go and just let it go and do its thing, and they've been burned for it. So it's just something to kind of really consider and understand. Document support, this one's more from an internal aspect, and if you utilize something like you provide like APIs and such, that's something that's very key. Good documentation support for your solution is what can be a make or break depending on who your audience is. And then monitoring maintenance, this kind of just goes alongside with some of that aspects of how often is it being used, and help you determine scale of your actual infrastructure and maintenance of your actual solution itself. Kind of goes in with that FinOps aspects as well. This is where they kind of come into play. And so understanding the actual aspects of your infrastructure, what's out there and all that, and making sure that it's effectively doing the pieces that it needs to and does it cost effectively. Jumping back real quick to define clear objectives and value proposition, bringing FinOps into this part is pretty critical, because it allows you to define different pieces and do it cost effectively and understand the larger aspects of the product itself, and be able to construct it in a way where the ROI is going to be at your most maximal aspect. And that's kind of our goal here with this, right? Is maximizing our value with our products. And so introducing FinOps from the very start is kind of one of those key aspects of what's going to make your product most successful from a financial standpoint. But jumping back, feedback loop and iteration, this is just kind of just more aspects of making your model itself better and grow, and kind of go into those aspects. And then this jumps into this aspect of launch and marketing. This is one big aspect, I would say, that kind of plays into FinOps, and making sure that you maximize your marketing and launch, and how that all kind of comes into play, and effectively scale things and make it kind of grow with what you need, which kind of brings us into the next part, is scale and growth. And so you've released your initial product, people love it, and that's great. But unfortunately, the world just constantly wants more and more from everything. And so being able to scale this product, not only to initially your first customer base may be a fraction of what you thought it was, or even if it's at the full scale, as it starts to grow popularity and becomes viral, it'll have to scale even more. Understanding how that scale works and how that comes back into play with financial operations, and making sure that you're being most cost effective and you're getting your return on investment from people utilizing it. And then growth in that aspect, what is it doing next? Is it going to integrate other automation tooling in that aspect? And how does it grow as with your customer base to do things that they not only want? So listening to your customer base and understanding what they're doing, seeing the interactions with what they're doing with your platform, understanding that, and then doing analytics on that is kind of a key thing to understand as well, which falls into that continuous innovation. Continue to work with your model and find new ways to solutionize different pieces of it, and figure out how to bring it to a product level. And then it just kind of cycles back and forth between from step 1 all the way back to 16, and it cycles back as you discover new innovations. Understand the clear objectives and value propositions of that, and then kind of go through that steps and how you work through that. And then it eventually just comes this cyclical cycle of being able to do release new products as efficiently as possible. So the benefits of this. So obviously market reach, being able to access a larger customer base, maybe selling to customers you never sold to before, You may extend your customer base in the sense that the individual may have not known they were a customer of yours and they needed to be. And so you may get them. You may even, I've seen it also where individuals will sell AI products to their competition. And they're kind of in the same space, and their competition doesn't have the capabilities of this enterprise being able to implement such solutions. So they'll actually buy that capability from their competitor to help them drive with their current competition. That being said, that doesn't necessarily happen all the time, but in different type of regulated areas, it can as well. So it just kind of different things to kind of look at when it comes to that. Revenue generation, most projects, especially when it comes to IT projects, very often most aren't essentially driving revenue for you. So most IT projects are actually not the product that you're selling to your customers. So it becomes this aspect of it becomes a cost to the company and not an actual income stream. With this, productizing your AI, it becomes a revenue stream and brings actual revenue to your company. So something to kind of consider. And then competitive edge. If you're a company that has never, if you're in an industry that has never done AI or anything like that, advanced analytics and all that, it's good to kind of start to consider bringing this AI in because it brings you into that competitive edge and advances your company much farther. It's just adopting new technologies and becoming better as a company to bring the most efficient and best product that you can for your customer base. That being said, bringing it all together. So how does this all come together? And this was kind of the big things that I wanted to pull together is the cost, that cloud cost management, resource optimization, cloud service management, performance monitoring, automation, DevOps, MLOps integration. How does that fit into the productizing AI steps? So you can see as they cut across straight ahead, that's just how that kind of goes hand in hand. So the cloud cost management, defining those clear objectives and value proposition, making sure that you put the necessary pieces in place. And as long as they follow along with what your objectives are and the value proposition, you'll get really good cloud cost management. Same with resource optimization, understanding your model and going through that POC effort and understanding all that. Kind of same with the cloud service management. These two kind of honestly go hand in hand. Same with the POC construction, validation, and model refinement and training. So essentially, when you go through this POC effort, you're identifying different solutions that you want to integrate into the overall product itself, whether that be AI, like hosted or managed AI solutions, or if you're creating a custom AI solution, or whether inside that custom AI solution, is there certain different types of models that should be using, and you're supposed to do retraining or training on it or fine tuning. All those kind of come into play in that POC construction and validation, and then it helps you manage and optimize the resources needed to create your AI product. And then performance monitoring, this goes with monitoring maintenance inside of the productizing AI steps. So it just allows you to understand when from an inference standpoint and a training standpoint, are you optimizing your different types of levels of compute and storage most effectively? And the overall solution in itself is allowing for the best ROI capable. And then automation, DevOps, and integration, this kind of comes back to that scalable infrastructure construction. And so scalable infrastructure construction is a kind of a twofold aspects. And so where that kind of plays is, so there's the scalable infrastructure when it comes to inference and being able to scale with the number of requests that come in and all that. That's not necessarily what we're getting into with the aspects of FinOps. And so the scalable infrastructure comes into play as well when it comes to introducing new products or new solutions as you go through a business and define new AI solutions that you think that are going to be better for not only your business or for your client base, how to deploy those most effectively and efficiently. So that kind of plays into that automation and DevOps and MLOps integration aspects, making sure that you produce products most efficiently and allow for not only engineers to do it effectively, but reduce the amount of time that is needed for them to release that into the world. So that being said, and I know that's a lot of content, we're going to kind of go through a couple different case studies. So the first one is kind of the good case study. So there's I would say that there's different arguments to this. And so I would say ChatGPT did a really good job when it came to productizing their AI solution. The big thing here is that they had a lot of learning lessons when it comes to this. There was a number of different AI and ML products that came out that were kind of flops, and the world knew it. And I think ChatGPT did a good job at looking at that and making sure that they didn't fall into that trap. So you can see here, these are all the different pieces that with inside of that productizing AI steps that kind of, I would say that they did successful, and there was kind of opportunities as well. And you'll see that user experience is in there twice, which is kind of an interesting thing, but you can't really help this one. But it's still, I think, something that was the world had to grow and understand to become better at, because there's no real good user experience research around it. But I'll get that to you in a minute. But the successes, the objectives and value proposition, understanding what people needed. I think that ChatGPT just kind of did that on its own, provided this AI solution that allowed for people to understand text at a greater level and efficientize a lot of different pieces that most normally people would take 30 minutes to an hour to do when it comes to report creation, summarization, all that stuff. And then deployment integration, I think that they did this really well in the sense of how to properly manage different types of calls and calls to the APIs and such. They had a bunch of different pieces that were put in place to limit a lot of this, to make it more efficient for them at a cost-effective basis. Because as it stands today, ChatGPT is free to use. There's other aspects that are driving revenue, but for the most part, ChatGPT is free, and where they kind of get most of their, I would say, ROIs back from the data that's put into it. And so we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But that being said, monitoring and maintenance just kind of goes into play with that. I mean, most people have probably heard about the aspects of the fact that they have a ungodly amount of teams out there going and refining and making this model better as time goes on. So it kind of goes into that maintenance aspect. User experience design, I mean, it was just nice because it was just a very simple user experience. It was just a prompt. You kind of worked with it and understood as to how to utilize it. It was very kind of straightforward, but there's a caveat to that. And then market research and validation. So I think that they did an okay job here. I'd still call it a success because they were able to go and understand how do they effectively provide this as a product to the world. And so they kind of let the world decide what they wanted to do with it, and then kind of allowed themselves to market off of that and build different types of presentations and ways to show that how it's going to be more effective. And so, and then how to grow this into the next level. But that being said, I think that was an opportunity for them in the sense of governance, compliance, and scale and growth. So they talk and have all these different aspects of what ChatGPT can do to the next level, but it's still not there, and they still haven't been able to integrate it with even like the internet and being able to do all that and have the governance and proper controls around it to allow for that. And then kind of going back to that user experience, one of the big things is prompt engineering. That was a brand new area that people didn't know anything about. So when it came to the user base who understood how to utilize it, they could do it and effectively use ChatGPT to do things that they needed. But prompt engineering was something that we had to go in and essentially teach people how to do effectively. And still, it's not an entirely understood aspect when people start to go to utilize ChatGPT. And so that being said, though, I'd say overall results, it's a success just due to the fact that it's inspired numerous of other applications and solutions that have come out. I mean, with Llama 2 and Bard and all these other pieces that are coming out and how they're integrating into cloud pieces, I think that ChatGPT really sparked this notion of it. So I would say that it's a successful productizing of their AI solution. So that being said, a not so successful solution, or a solution that had a lot of opportunities, you know, people probably remember this, was their Facebook's face recognition and images. And so this is not necessarily an AI solution, it's more of an ML solution. But because of all the other integrations and software integrations, I would say that there's AI tendencies to it. That being said, successes, they understood what the people wanted and are spending a lot of time doing, so they wanted to help with that. but their intentions were so that they could help them spend less time tagging people in photos and spend more time scrolling on Facebook and running into ads. So that's kind of their aspect. Their launch and marketing on it, though, was pretty good. I mean, I remember from the very first start of it, this was revolutionary. It's great. I wanted to use it. But then as time went on, test and quality assurance, people started to notice that the ML solution was had I don't want to say this bias to it and was making suggestions in inappropriate ways, and so it started to receive a lot of lashback for that, and so they started to get into privacy and compliance issues and started dealing with a bunch of other aspects, the market research of whether it was actually needed. I mean, yes and no. You could go back and forth on that because to be honest, every time I post a picture nowadays on Facebook, I'm not tagging anybody. So is it really needed? For them, I would say that it was needed because it helps with their recommendation engines under the hood to say, hey, we should recommend this product and this ad and that ad to this individual because I know that they're tagged in these same photos. And so builds this larger network under the hood for them to be able to do initial processing and understanding who's connected to who, make recommendations to whoever. So for them, I would say it was a success to a certain extent. But at the end of the day, it was a failure or an opportunity, I would say, for the overall aspect of the product. And the ROI, I mean, it's not really generating revenue for anybody, other than if you sent them a collection of photos and you paid for it. And most of the time, I don't think that was a thing. So, and then scale and growth. I mean, it really couldn't scale and grow because it got hit with a bunch of litigations and a bunch of issues. And so it just kind of got stopped. And what happened? They deleted the project and all related data to it. And so it was kind of a flop of a project, unfortunately. So as much as I hate to say it, it is what it is. But the thing is Facebook learned from it. And they committed back to the community and say, hey, this was a failure on our part and we know it. And they worked with it and showed different types of ways to grow and be better than what happened there and things to consider. That being said, in conclusion, 3 things I really want you to take away from this, and I want to make sure that I leave enough time for questions here, is that incorporate FinOps practices in your AI productizing lifecycle. If you're not thinking about how you're going to optimize your financial operations with inside of your AI products, you're setting yourself up a little bit for failure because eventually to the point where either it's governance or cost will eventually make your product fail. If it costs too much money and there's not enough ROI, you're never going to get funding back to do more AI projects. So making sure that FinOps teams are integrated from the very start of your AI productionizing plan, and then proper planning to execute that product to protect both your company and the IP that you're putting out there. So make sure that that helps the company not be part of a problem that's currently occurring today. So big 3 things I want you to take away from. That being said, that's all I have for today. Are there any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So are there any tools out there, like, for instance, AWS has a bunch of kind of out-of-box tools for various cloud operations. Are there anything in their tool set to help with security that use AI and that will also protect customer data?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different things that you can put in play in all cloud environments that allows you to effectively utilize the cloud environment for AI services. That being said, all AI services state, AWS, Google, and Azure have all stated that your data is your data and it shouldn't be utilized inside of models that you're using. Whether that's true or not, I can't say. They're going to do what they want because the data is located on their platforms and they have control of it at the end of the day. So it's just something to kind of consider and think about as time goes along, because they can change their mind later down the line and say, well, the data is ours now and it's part of our solution and we're growing and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of different things to kind of consider into that, whether or not you want to continue and trust them. I think there's a lot of legal aspects that'll probably come out to play in the coming months, I would say. as to how that's going to be controlled and managed when from the get-go you were told that your data is never going to be utilized for optimizing and creating better solutions for the cloud AI products. So there's a lot of different pieces in there that I think that are going to come into play just later down the line. So there are toolings though to help you secure your data, make it more effective, but those are just standard operating practices when it comes to cloud operations. That how do you control your data? What are the necessary access controls and security that needs to go around it? So, and then they have other AI tools that are built-in monitoring and that utilize AI that they've built and integrated it back into your solution to help with that monitoring aspect. So a lot of pieces in there that kind of come into play. That being said, it's always good to look at just first introducing just standard monitoring first, just to like get a good understanding of your metric itself to make sure it makes sense, because those AI monitoring tool sets can be pretty costly if you're not careful. So just something to kind of consider there.
I think we have another question, kind of in the same vein, I believe, by Russell. Is security of companies' information mainly handled through the APIs and keeping the company information out of the AI?
Yeah, so not necessarily. So there's data access that you can establish at the data storage layer. And then when it comes to data security itself and how that integrates with the AI, essentially what happens is that you are in your own public cloud space. And so there's ways to initiate and access the models that they provide. For example, in Google's environment with Bard and their Palm 2 APIs. So you're instantiating a version of that Palm into your cloud environment that you're specifically using that nobody else has access to. And so whenever you interact with it and utilize it for applications, that data is simply stayed within inside of this session. And say you decide to get rid of Palm and Palm 2. Everything that was stored inside of there is deleted, and it's never stored or shared back with Google. That being said, in the future, as a probability, Google could come back and say, well, you have this standing AI, we're going to utilize the information that we know from it as a black box. And so that's something that you have to be kind of careful for. That being said, they haven't said anything like that. They have all said that that model that you're hosting with inside of your own platform is specifically yours. The data doesn't leave, and it's all yours. And so there's data access aspects when it comes to that. Now, if you're looking at utilizing the open source ones like Bard and ChatGPT, that data is theirs. I mean, they say that from the start. Don't introduce any PII, PHI data, or proprietary information into this because it's theirs then. And so you just have to be really careful with how you're using these different types of solutions. Hope I answered that.
I don't see any follow-up questions, so I'll give people one more minute to see if there's any follow-up questions. And while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and let you know what the next week's talk is. So the next week's talk is about performance measurement in .NET. It's a more technical talk, but I think it's along the same veins as Scott pointed out. Performance and how much cloud resources you're using is really important. So you want to make sure you sort of measure and manage that. And it's with Tim Rayburn. So yeah, we hope to see you next week. And I don't see any additional questions. So thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. And if you have any other questions that you don't want to ask here, but you want to ask me in person, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to go into the stop recording.